Hello, good morning everybody and welcome back to the UK Stroke Assembly live and in your homes. My name's Tony Banks, I'm Head of Conference and Events at the Stroke Association. I'm really pleased to see you all here back with us this morning for another bumper week of the UK Stroke Assembly. If you've missed anything so far, you can catch up on the Stroke Association's website at stroke.org.uk/UKSA virtual. We have a whole host of webinars that we've hosted already. Last week, we focused on research. You can find both of those webinars on our website now. So do please check them out and pass them on to others if you think they'd find them helpful. As always, we want to hear from you, and these sessions are designed for you, and we want you to have your say. So if you're in the chat box, please do say hello, introduce yourselves to each other and to us, and ask our speakers for today any questions you'd like. As usual, we've got Natalie with us, taking the questions. Good morning, Nat. How are you?
Good morning everyone, and welcome to today's session. As always, if you do have any questions and comments, please do use the comments box. You'll be able to find this on the right hand side of your screen, and if you scroll down to the bottom of your page, you'll be able to input any comments or questions you have into the text bar and then submitting using the arrow key. I look forward to reading all those for you.
Thanks, Natalie. This week, as I mentioned, is a bumper edition of the Stroke Assembly. We've got 4 webinars in total for you across the course of this week. So we focus on our support the Stroke Association provides to you. And today we begin with our Stroke Helpline. We'll come on to that in a moment. But we've also got tonight something we're very excited about, our quiz, the first ever Stroke Assembly virtual quiz with the one and only Chris Tarrant. You can join that at 7:30 p.m. We'll post the link on how you can join that. Whether you're alone or part of a team, please do join us tonight for the virtual quiz. On Wednesday at 11, we have a session on My Stroke Guide, the Stroke Association's very own self-help tool. We'll be giving you a demonstration of that. And then on Friday, we're talking about our Here For You program, our volunteer telephone support we've put in place, especially in response to the coronavirus and supporting people affected by stroke throughout. So on to today's session. I'm delighted we've got Sian and Laura with us today from our Stroke Helpline team, who are going to tell you all about what the Stroke Helpline does and how it's here for you. So without further ado, I'll introduce Sian and Laura for today's session. Enjoy.
Of this bumper week. I'm delighted to be joining UK Stroke Assembly today, and delighted to be able to talk to you a bit about the Stroke Helpline, which is one part of this stroke network that the Stroke Association provides. So on the next slide, we'll take you through our agenda. So together with my colleague Laura, we're going to tell you a bit about the Helpline, which is, as I say, one part of the wider support network for stroke survivors and their families and friends. So in a minute, I'll talk a bit more about the wider support network and how the Helpline fits into that. Then Laura will tell you a bit more about how we do what we do. And then we'd like to show you a short film, which I'm hoping will bring the Helpline to life for you in a far better way than Laura and I could do just by talking to you on this facility. And then if we've got any time left, we'll take a few questions. So the next slide shows the whole of our support network, and it's really small, I know that, so I'm going to take you around it, and I'll take you around clockwise from the top. So the first 3 circles are our Helpline, our printed information, and our website. These are available to anyone across the UK, either free or for a small cost. You can get electronic copies of our printed information from the website, or you can call the Helpline and ask for information to be sent to you. We do far more than just send information out to you from the Helpline, as Laura will tell you in a few minutes. But I wanted you to know that so that you know there's a link between the Helpline, our printed information, and our website. So going round the next couple of circles, we also have an online self-management tool. This is called My Stroke Guide, that some of you might already know about, and this is available to anyone across the UK. In some parts of the country, we also have staff who will work with people face-to-face over a period of time. This is usually fairly soon after a stroke, when people need a hand to work through the practical things like arranging rehab therapy, understanding new medication, working out how to live as normal as possible. In some other parts of the country, we also have stroke groups. These provide essential peer support, so stroke survivors and carers supporting and learning from each other. We've also developed 2 new types of support in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Here for you is a regular telephone chat with one of our volunteers. This happens every week for 12 weeks, and the aim of this is that the conversation is a point of contact and a point of reference for people who may be feeling isolated and lonely. Stroke Connect is a different kind of service, a different kind of support. We get lists of people who've just come out from hospital after a stroke, and we call them for a brief 20-minute conversation. We're checking in to see how people are and also talking to them about how the Stroke Association can support them. And obviously the helpline is one part of that support. So I'm going to hand over to Laura now to tell you a bit more about the helpline.
Thank you, Sian. I am a helpline information officer on the Stroke Helpline, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the helpline and what our team is made up with. So on this slide, you can see a picture of our team. So we're a team of 18 with 14 of us working as helpline information officers. We have 2 helpline managers, Liz, who you can see in the middle there with the white top, and John, who's at the end of the row on the right in the check shirt, and Sian, who is our head of stroke support, who you've just heard from. She's second from the left. We've also got Chris, who works on our CRM systems, who is on the second row towards the table in the middle with the blue shirt. So we're based in Bromsgrove, as you can see from the next slide. We've just got some information about kind of where we're based. So we're based in Bromsgrove. As I say, we're a team of 18. In terms of the amount of inquiries that we get, last year we answered just over 19,500. The majority of those being calls, but we do get emails and social media and messages as well, so through Facebook and through Twitter. We also take letters as well, so we'll respond to letters that we're sent. We spend a total of 4,400 hours talking to people and following up on calls last year, and we find that the average call length is about 9 minutes. Obviously, sometimes you do get calls that are longer than that. Sometimes you get calls that are shorter than that. In terms of what a typical day looks like, we each have 5 hours on the phone, so that's usually split up into a 3-hour and a 2-hour block. And as well as that, we have written inquiries assigned to us. So we might need to do a follow-up email, we might need to do a follow-up letter, or we'll respond to Facebook messages and Twitter messages as well. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of our team, how we're made up, what kind of a typical day looks like. What we're going to do now is just show you a film, which is going to give you a real insight into what it's like to be a helpline information officer. So I hope you all really enjoy it.
So I'm Laura and I'm a helpline information officer. I spend 5 hours on the phone every day, and we take emails and sometimes Facebooks and things like that as well. And at every kind of opportunity, we have that chance to speak to people and really make a difference to them when they're really going through something really difficult.
Hi, I'm Hope and I work on the Stroke Helpline. We often get family members and friends call us to talk about their loved one that's had a stroke and is behaving differently or is not quite the same person as they were before their stroke, and they want to talk to somebody about it. And, you know, we understand that after stroke, sometimes people's behaviour can change. That can either be because of the damage in the brain which happened from the stroke, or it could be as an emotional reaction to the stroke.
My name's Simon. I'm one of the Helpline information officers here at the Stroke Helpline. And one of the topics we get asked about a lot is the physical effects of stroke. These vary, but the more common topics we talk about are physiotherapy, muscle weakness, and fatigue. Fatigue is one of the more common side effects of stroke. The way we describe fatigue to people is like a rechargeable battery. So everybody has a battery that when you go to sleep, it recharges back to full. When you have a stroke, however, your battery capacity may be lower, which means that you get tired a lot quicker. And fatigue can be a difficult conversation to talk to people about because it's so unique to each individual. So what one person may find easy, another person may find difficult. So on a call, we often explore and we ask them to look at themselves and how they manage their day-to-day life.
Sometimes they'll call the helpline to sort of talk it through with somebody and find out, is this normal, or is this okay, or why is this happening? You know, why these things may be happening and how it's affecting them as a family member or friend. You know, they're the ones that have called us, and often they're the ones that are living with the person and wanting to know, how can I deal with this? Is this normal? So we'll just talk them through. We'll let them know, you know, why these things may be happening. We'll also give them ideas that they can, you know, talk to their partner or their loved one about.
So sometimes people call the helpline to ask about kind of the more practical aspects of stroke. They will ask about what benefits they might be entitled to apply for. There's other financial support that they might be able to get as well. And then we can signpost them to organisations where they can find out that information, and also where they can get help applying for them as well.
I recently took a call from a younger individual who had had a stroke. She was looking for a mixture of private physiotherapy and the NHS provided physiotherapy. And in that case, we know who to signpost them on to. So I was able to give this lady the contact details of how to find physiotherapy online, because often it's a combination of the type of physiotherapy they provide and the kind of person that both they are and the physiotherapist is.
For myself, the calls that always stick with me are those that come from younger stroke survivors. So especially when you get people who have had like a TIA, for example, and especially when they can't figure out the cause of it, that can be really difficult for people to come to terms with. I've spoken to people who actually live really healthy lifestyles. They exercise really frequently, they eat really healthily, you know, they keep their brains active. And sometimes, you know, even those kinds of people can have strokes and TIAs as well.
I guess calls that I find challenging on the helpline are ones around end of life. Their loved one may have been put on an end of care pathway and they're really trying to make sense of what happened. You know, we know strokes happen very suddenly, you know, it'd be so quick for family members that it can be difficult to understand what's going on or why it may have happened. And, you know, and on the helpline, we'll sort of let them talk and then perhaps feed in some guidance to help answer some of their questions.
With the nature of our jobs, we do take difficult calls sometimes. People can be affected by things like depression, anxiety after they have a stroke, but sometimes that can go a lot deeper as well. Sometimes you might speak to people who are actually suicidal or who've had suicidal thoughts, and when you come off that call, you've kind of absorbed everything that that person has told you. We have group resilience strategies, so we can have a big debrief with all the members of the team. We can do debriefs one-on-one with each other, And then we also have our personal resilience strategies. So for me, that's usually kind of going out for a walk. So just going out in the fresh air, looking at nature, getting out. It helps me kind of process that call as well, let it go, which is really important. And yeah, just kind of getting out there and being able to then, come back to the phones, after you've taken that really difficult call and support the next person.
Due to the nature of the way the calls work, we often have one-off conversations with people, and sometimes they may be in a crisis or a situation whereby they need immediate help, and you then signpost them on to other people, and you're then unaware of how that call resolves. A big part of working for the Stroke Association and the Helpline is knowing that I'm making a real difference day to day in supporting stroke survivors, their families and their carers. And it's something that I hope to do for many years to come.
When they call the helpline, the time is theirs, and we'll just be with them to support them through.
So I hope that was a useful introduction to the Helpline, folks. I know we've had a couple of questions through, so I'd like to start answering those if that works for you. So the first question is from Mike, and Mike says, why can't stroke survivors be contacted and helped when they first have their stroke and while they are still in the hospital bed? It's a really good question, Mike. And while when I saw that came in, I was scribbling some notes down while the film was playing, actually. So there's a number of things I want to say to respond to that. So the first one is, actually, an awful lot of stroke survivors are really quite poorly when they first have their stroke and they're in hospital. And so they're not in a position or able to take in information, the kind of information that we might be talking to them about. The second thing I want to say, Mike, is that time immediately after a stroke is the most important time in somebody's post-stroke recovery, if you like, because it's the window in which, in the acute phase, in which the clinicians and the medical staff really need to be working closely with the stroke survivor. So that's their time, really. We're not clinicians. We would come in at a slightly later point in someone's stroke journey. There's another interesting angle to this as well, which is that actually we get more inquiries on the helpline from friends and family than we do from stroke survivors, which suggests that while stroke survivors, while somebody's in the hospital bed, as you said, Mike, the people who are taking responsibility to find out the information, so to do the fact-finding stuff, are often the people around the stroke survivor themselves. So that's one of the reasons, Mike, why we're not straight in there immediately. But we do also have local staff who are hospital-based, who are working really closely with hospital staff to provide support. So there is a Stroke Association presence in hospitals, not everywhere, but in some places. And so there will be stroke survivors who are in the hospital who will see our staff as well. I hope that helps, Mike. The next question I've got here is from Marnie. And Marnie's saying, the National Clinical Guidelines for Stroke, the patient version, is really useful for patients and families in the early days after stroke. How often do you direct callers to it to help understand stroke care? Fantastic question, Marnie. Not only do we direct callers to it as and when is needed on the call, but the guidelines underpin the conversations that helpline officers have with callers. So as well as signposting to it, and we do that frequently, our team is also using it to inform the conversations. I hope that helps.
Brilliant.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Sian. That's all the questions we've got in the comments box so far. Mike's just responded to your response saying that's when I could have been helped the most, and every stroke survivor should be referred by the hospital. So that's a response to your feedback. So thank you, Sian. I think Tony's got a question for yourselves as well.
I do have a question for you, Sian. Thank you both of you actually for that great presentation. I wanted to speak to you about coronavirus and this pandemic we've all been living through, and how that's affected the Stroke Helpline and the support we provide to stroke survivors.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. That's a timely question. So it's been a really interesting experience for us over the last few months. And what we had assumed would happen hasn't happened in the way that we thought it would. So we had assumed that on the helpline we would have a spike, an extended spike in calls, so an increase in calls from people who were either stroke survivors and concerned about their risk of coronavirus or COVID-19, and or from people who were concerned about COVID-19 and the risk of stroke. We didn't get that spike in calls. In fact, what we got was the opposite. We saw a drop in calls to the helpline. And we saw this probably for the first, sort of month to 6 weeks, until as an organisation we started putting out some publicity and communicating with our contacts and with people to say that we were here. On the back of certainly the second round of communication in May, we then saw a massive increase in calls and also emails from people who were responding to the communication, to the post and the email contact that we made with them, to say, I got your letter, I got your email, I'm contacting you because I know you're there. Which has been really interesting. It's the first time really that we've ever seen such a direct response from a communication that the Stroke Association has sent out to the helpline. And what it told us was that there were quite a few people, stroke survivors, families and friends, who didn't really have any burning questions about stroke and COVID-19, but were generally feeling off-kilter, lonely, slightly out of sorts, and wanted a conversation. So we were able to have those conversations with people to talk about it in the context of stroke, but also to signpost and refer into other support that the organisation has, including our Here For You support. So it's been a really interesting experience for us. In terms of staffing on the helpline, what we've done is we've increased our staffing on the helpline temporarily. So I'm really pleased to say that we've got a group of helpline assistants. So these are staff that we fast-tracked to train to answer calls that have been coming in. And having them on board means that we're able to answer more calls at times when people are contacting us. So our answer rate has gone up, which I'm very pleased to be able to say. But also we've been able to have really timely conversations with people who might not have particular questions about stroke and COVID, as I've said, but who might really just be wanting to have a more general conversation to ward off some of the loneliness and isolation that people are feeling.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Sian. It's really interesting to hear what you guys have been experiencing for the last few months. Natalie, I can see we've had a couple more questions that have come in. Do you want to put them to Sian and Laura?
We have. So thank you to everyone who's popped their questions in so far. I've got another one that's been asked by Roger. So it's around our staff on the stroke helpline. So are any of our advisors stroke survivors themselves?
That's a good question. We have one helpline officer who is a stroke survivor. We have had more in the past, but with the usual turnover of staff, some of those have gone now. We have an ongoing conversation within the team, Roger, about the merits and also the challenges actually of having stroke survivors on the helpline team. The merits, I think, speak for themselves. We'd have a team of people, or we'd have people on the helpline who are able to identify with our callers' experience, as our stroke survivor can do. But that also brings challenges, Roger, and the challenges are around helping an advisor who is a stroke survivor, helping an officer who is a stroke survivor maintain their boundaries and their well-being. So there's an issue of risk, really, of over-identifying that would mean that there would be a boundary that will be crossed that may be unhelpful to the caller and also unhelpful to the helpline officer. So it's a really interesting one. It's one that we monitor and we interview quite carefully with that in mind.
Thank you, Sian. I've got another question in here from Gary. It says, I wasn't contacted for 3 months after my stroke. I seem to have been slipped through the cracks. Do you have anything in place so it doesn't happen again? So Sian, I'm not sure if you'd be able to help this one with Gary.
Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that, Gary. I don't know when you had your stroke. If I tell you about what happens in the normal pathway, so normally a hospital will send a list of all the stroke survivors that they've had obviously through the hospital to our local teams. Our local teams will then make contact with those stroke survivors. Gary, it may be that you are living in an area where we don't have a local team. Our local face-to-face support isn't available throughout the UK, so there are gaps, unfortunately. It may be that reason why you weren't contacted. The helpline itself doesn't make outbound calls at this stage. That's something that we're looking at for the future. So that may be why you weren't contacted. What I would say, Gary, is if you have questions and you want to have a conversation about that, then you're very welcome to call our helpline or email our helpline. And Natalie will be giving some details, certainly signposting to the website for that information at the end of this session.
Thank you, Sian, again. That's all the questions I've got at the moment. So thank you everyone today who has inputted those for our speakers. And thank you again to Sian and Laura for today's webinar. Yeah,
huge thank you to you both. We really appreciate you running the session with us today. Before you go, Laura, one quick question for you. You haven't had any questions yet. Unfair for you to go without me asking you one. Just to sum up very quickly, what's the best thing about your job?
I think it's just about kind of being there for somebody who is in a really difficult situation, especially when you get those calls where somebody has called and they're like, I just don't know where to start, and it's like, okay, just start at the beginning, and you can just give that person the time to ask any questions, to have things like clarified, to give them reassurance, to basically just give them that space. And I think that's probably my favourite part, that we're not restricted on time, that we can give people as much time, obviously not hours and hours, but we can give them as much time as they need to go through all of those questions and to explore all of those emotions. And it just feels like that's really valuable for people, and so many people always reflect that that might have been the first time that they've actually been allowed to do that, or the first time they've actually been listened to. So for me, I think that's like my favourite part, is just being with that person while they're going through something really difficult.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you both and the rest of the team for everything that you do. I feel incredibly proud to work alongside our Stroke Helpline. You guys do an incredible job supporting so many people affected by stroke, and I know people get so much out of calling the helpline and working with you. So thanks again. And we're going to post some links to more information that people can access if they want to find out more about the work that you do. But for now, thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Tony. Pleasure.
Bye. So that ends today's session. We have got more, as I mentioned earlier. So join us tonight for Chris Tarrant's virtual quiz. He's going to be hosting from 7:30 p.m. tonight. If you haven't signed up already, we'll post the link now and how you can do that. You can enter on your own or as a team. There are special prizes up for grabs. I'll see you again later on tonight for that. And also later this week, we mentioned at 11 o'clock on Wednesday, we've got the My Stroke Guide team giving you a demo of our self-help tool that's available to anyone affected by stroke. And finally, on Friday, we talk about Here For You, our volunteer telephone program, again, supporting people affected by stroke throughout the coronavirus crisis. Thanks for your questions and comments today. It's great to see everyone joining again, and we'll see you tonight for the quiz. Take care.